You've been hearing me talk a lot about Rob Arsenault and Weather My Trains, but how about I tell you about my experience? I can sum it up with one word: easy. My first weathering job was a locomotive, and Rob made it simple. He sent me easy to follow shipping instructions, and in just a few minutes at the local post office, it was off. And the results? Absolutely amazing. As promised, Rob notched up the realism with an amazing weathering job, and it wasn't too long after that, my rolling stock was heading his way. And now you can make it even easier by ordering your next Bowser, Intermountain, Rapido, or Scale Trains locomotive from Weather My Trains. For more info, visit their website at weathermytrains.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. Joining me today, coming all the way from the United Kingdom, Alan Aitken. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Ray. Thanks for having me along. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to chat with you all the way across the big pond and get to know a little bit about you and your Buffalo and Pittsburgh model railroad. Of course, I've gotten to know it a little bit better thanks to your YouTube channel. And boy, you're really cranking them out. 100 videos, and you've got nearly 13,000 subscribers to your channel. That's phenomenal. When did you start doing the YouTube thing?
Unbelievably, my YouTube channel has been going for about 4 years. In December last year, about December the 7th, I think it was last year, I had 184 subscribers. And then I put a couple of videos up. I built a shed in my back garden, put a layout in it, which is where Buffalo is. Put a couple of videos out, and it just clicked. And then it seems to have a big following in India. And then I'm literally gaining unbelievable amounts. I mean, it's roughly 1,000 subscribers a week, I think, now.
Wow.
And I can't explain it. There's so many people asking me how I'm doing it. If I could bottle it and sell it, then I would retire quite happily, I think. But yeah, it's just amazing.
Yeah, it'd be nice to know how you cracked the algorithm, because it's seemingly working, and you got a lot of folks watching those videos, and some of them I saw, I think, was like 30 to 40,000 views, and you're just killing it with this channel. So very, very cool, and always great to see good content out there. And you share more than just your layout. You've got some how-to stuff on there as well, and a variety more. Again, 100 videos on there that you've created, and awesome to see that. And I think that's what drew our attention to you. You've also been a participant in the Friends of Around the Layout podcast group, so you're on our radar, and glad we're able to have a chat today and get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah, it's great. The Around the Layout's been brilliant. The connections, I mean, I'm in Scotland, and the connections that I've made, I mean, I model obviously America, is unbelievable. I mean, the stickers alone, through that, I've managed to acquire locomotives of friend groups now, and we've got some WhatsApp groups where we do some switching between each other just through that one thing. And it's really, I would call myself like a lone wolf modeler, and this has opened it out greatly to see other layouts and to be able to speak to other people.
Yeah, that's one thing that's very magic about the podcast, and about, even the YouTube channels and any of that content creation stuff. When you reach yourself out there and put it out there, the people that you get to meet and the connections you make. And hey, without a podcast and all of this, a guy from Plainfield, Connecticut, talking to a guy over in the United Kingdom would be probably near impossible. But we have that now. We have that awesome connection. It's great that you're creating that content, and we're able to chat today. So let's get right into it. Let me ask you, what got you started in this hobby?
My dad was a soldier for the British Army, and he won a few pounds in a train journey up the road. Popped into I think I was 6 months old, popped into a shop and bought me a train set. And there's pictures of me at 6 months just watching a train go around. My granddad was a head boilerman for a whiskey making company in Edinburgh, just next to one of the main train stations. And if there was ever a problem at the train station, everything would be routed through his brewery. So he's seen everything, from steam to the change into diesel to everything. And then had hundreds of books, and I borrowed them, I read them, I found my school library, decided I want to start a layout, and I took it for there, really.
So you get this early gift as a kid, and you talk about learning how to build a layout. What were you running that train on?
The very first layout I ever built, Hornby at the time, and done a track mat system, which is like an 8x4 plastic mat that you would put down on a board, and it would have a picture, and you could buy it in packs. So you buy the initial train set, which had a loopy track and maybe a siding off it, maybe a loco and a couple of coaches. And then what would happen is you would buy pack A, B, C, and D, and this would then fill out the board, and then you would be able to buy a scenic pack. So, I mean, I was about 10-year-old, had a paper round, used to deliver papers, used to deliver free papers. I'd save every ounce of pocket money. I'd go to a wee shop in Edinburgh and pick up these packs and then build this Hornby track plan up. And then by the end of it, during the summer and a little bit longer, I had an 8x4 board that had 3 loops in it with a siding. And it was easy to follow. It was nice. It was a little British tanker loco, 2 coaches. And then for my 10th birthday, because I think my granddad and my dad seen I was so much into it, they bought me the Mallard, which is a streamline loco over here, broke the British steam record for the speed, 124 mile an hour. And I bought myself a loco, which I still own, both of them to this day. And it just it's always stayed with me.
Railroading over there, you mentioned seeing a little bit in some participation. Tell us a little bit about the prototype and what you had seen as a kid growing up over in the UK.
When I was younger, I lived in the outskirts of Edinburgh. So I think you would call it a suburb. So it was probably about 7 or 8 mile from the centre. And then when I was a bit younger, and it changed days now, but I used to go into town with my brother, and we'd go to Waverley train station, and we'd just watch passenger trains and watch different traffic move out our way. There was a thing called the beaching effect that happened in the late 60s, which tore a lot of rail out of the UK, took a lot of rail away from us, and railways were turned into walking paths and things like that. So if I wanted to see anything, I had to go into the city centre of Edinburgh. So for me, trains were mainly in books at first, and what my granddad would show me pictures of, and how he would talk. The physical, I didn't have a railway going through my backyard or even through my town. So it was a kind of a weekend, I'd maybe pop up into Edinburgh, I'd have a look around, see what was happening. There's about 3 model shops in Edinburgh at the time, so I would rotate my way through them during the day, go and bug the people who owned them, just looking at stuff. So that's how the hobby for me started, certainly in that way.
Were the hobby shops that you saw, were they tilted more towards UK models, or was it more North American, a mix of both? What was that like?
Even to today, it's British. Everything is British 00, which is just the loading gauge is different from your HO scale. So everything it was a very rare event to see anything outside the UK. It would be even French, German, anything like that. You wouldn't really find anything like that. Then DCC kicked in to the system at probably about the early 2000s, and there was a shop up a bit further north up in Scotland, in Helensburgh in Scotland, called Max Models, and it was going into Aladdin's Cave, and he stocked American stock, and it was like the Walther's catalogue on steroids. It was everything. I mean, you would literally. It was about a 2-hour drive for us to get to it. And in Scotland, the 2-hour drive is country roads 2-hour drive. It's not 2 hours on a motorway. And then we would spend the day there. There was a group of 3 or 4 of us would go over for the day, and we would save for the month. And then we would go there. You would spend the day, and you would literally be just pulling boxes and boxes off the shelves and kits. And I mean, I bought my first big boy over there, Genesis Affair. And the first time I'd seen a big boy was in an HO model form there. Yeah. And then you're starting to be able to pick up DVDs. I bought the Walther's catalogue, which was a massive inspiration for where things went. And then I found that a lot of the model shows over here, 95% of them was a British layout. So it was British countryside with a British train running through it. And I found it a bit tedious and a bit same. And then there was one club I met who had done an American ON30 layout when the Bachmann started to bring out the sets with the the 260 and the coaches for the Colorado and the different ones that were there. And they'd done this beautiful 16-foot long, 4-foot deep backwoods America, probably early 1900 layout. And the locals had sound. It looked so different. It was like something out of a country and western film I'd watched on the TV.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, where does this come from? Where did you get it? And then that opened my eyes to the fact that there's more than just British steam and then diesels, and it's available to get. And then the internet was starting to kick in by that time. So stuff is starting to become a bit more easier to purchase on that front. So I've changed that way.
Yeah, so you're inspired. So tell me a little bit more about this club that you saw with this North American. Was this something that you visited? Were you a member of this club? How did you connect with them?
I had seen a flyer come in about DCC. I was actually out a model railroad magazine that I had, and then there was a shop called Mackay's Models, which are no longer here, in Glasgow, that me and my friend took a drive over to. And this was when we started to see DCC, and we've seen a lot of American locals. And I had asked him, I says, is there any clubs round about me that maybe that support the DCC system rather than your DC, and maybe run something different than British? And he'd recommended Thistle Model Makers, which were based in Edinburgh, which at the time is where I stayed. So I contacted John Bowman there, who's still a very good friend of mine. He does all my wiring and all my layouts. And I got involved, went along there, seen this layout that I had seen at the show, that was the American 130. They were still in the process of adding to it and building to it at the time. And then we just started chatting, and then it become the world become my oyster, because their contacts, and because the internet wasn't quite as it is just now, they knew a lot of different shops within the UK that was selling things that weren't British, and we could pick up Japanese, we could pick up German, we could pick up Swiss, pick up a lot of different things in a lot of different gauges, and we could make, and it was more interesting, because then I would go away and research about the places, and they had a better interest, because in the UK and in Scotland, a model railway club builds their exhibition layouts. They don't have a static. Certainly, when I started, they don't have static layouts like you see in America, where 20 club members get together. They'll have a basement or a building somewhere. They'll build a layout that suits a time frame in an area for where they're looking for. In Scotland, we build a layout, probably like maybe 30 foot would be deemed a long layout back then, quite a large layout at that point, and probably between the 12 to 30 foot range, and it would be just like snippets of different things in different areas. And each club would build a layout, and then that club would run a show. So they would hire a hall somewhere, and then they would hire a hall, they would invite guest layouts to come and see it from around the country, get together, have a weekend, play with trains, and then everything get packed up and put away again. And then the club rooms would then be used to build the next exhibition layout or tweak your exhibition layout. So for us, certainly the difference that I've seen between the UK and America, we were more based on playing with trains once in a week, and then potentially building something that you would take to a show for a weekend. You maybe do that for a couple of times a year.
Yeah,
and it was good, because it gave you the opportunity to model American HO or ON30 or a German 00 HO layout or a Swiss layout or a Japanese N-gauge. So it allowed my collection to look like Jason Donovan's Technicolor Dreamcoat. It had a bit of everything in it. There was nothing specific. And I had everything from N scale to ON30 to G. So
wow. So yeah, you were pretty diverse in your collection of model railroading, thanks to all this exposure through these what I would call them like a modular club, I guess, here in the US, and where you bring your layout, set it up, run it, and then put it away, store it, which has got to be, I mean, it's got to be neat to be able to connect, obviously, with folks and connect a modular. I've never been part of a modular club. I've seen them. I've talked to those type folks, but it's got to be a lot of fun to connect. But then, the ability to only run it a few times a year has got to be a little frustrating too.
Very frustrating. And that's why, for me personally, I moved away from where the Edinburgh the Thistle Model Makers was. I moved to a different town in Scotland. It was just too far to get there during the week, and I found myself only being able to play with trains once a month or maybe once every 3 or 4 months. And I'm like, I'm interested in this hobby. I love modelling. I do like doing all this. Why don't I put something together for myself? And in the UK, if you have a basement, it's a dungeon or it's full of
Yeah.
water. So most of the modelling's either done in the back garden in a shed. If you're very lucky and your wife's good, a spare room, or in the attic in your house. So it then transitioned for me that I was like, but then when you do that, you have to then decide, this is the layout I'm going to build. So I have to build a scale. I have to kind of pick something that I want to do and then try and make it work for everything that I had sitting. So I put in a layout in my attic at the time, and for some reason I picked a Swiss narrow gauge layout. So it was a totally different width track that HO trains wouldn't run on, and I thought, this is great. And then I really sat and had a good think about it and thought, well, if I had made this HO track, I could have ran anything on it, but now I'm stuck with this.
So you ended up with Swiss, basically. Just you don't really remember how you ended up there. I mean, was it just something that you saw it and fell in love quickly and just wanted to be different, rebel? What was the story there?
All the clubs in Scotland get together and run a national show, an exhibition at Model Rail Scotland at the end of February, and I was at that, and I'd seen a couple of Swiss narrow gauge layouts there, and the rolling stock is beautiful. I mean, the scenery in Switzerland is phenomenal. The Swiss Alps, and the rolling stock's beautiful. It just ran straight from the box. Some of the problems I had at an earlier age with the British stuff that was getting manufactured at the time is you sometimes spent more money trying to make it run than you did actually purchase in the local. And it's changed now greatly. But what I found when I bought what you would call a blue box, I think, a blue box loco, or you would buy a Genesis Athearn or something like that, you could take it straight out of the box, put it in the tracks, and it's pretty much running for the rest. It maybe needs ran in, but you've not got any worries. And the reliability there was different. And the Swiss stuff was so beautiful and so reliable. And I like something that's different. I don't go with the norm. Like I wouldn't have a nice British layout that had a steam locomotive, a rake of coaches that go through beautiful countryside. I like to do something that has a story and changes it a little bit. So that's why I went with Swiss. It was different. It was really nice. It was just to run through some scenery. I love doing scenery, and it kind of tickled my fancy at the time. So I thought, this is really what I wanted to try.
Yeah.
But I find myself flitting between ideas, as my wife calls me, a bit of a kind of magpie. So I built this beautiful Swiss layout in the attic. It was lovely. And then I thought, this is great. Let's sell it all now and go on and start buying HO. So that's where I ended up changing it.
Yeah. How far did you get in that layout, the Swiss layout?
I had the track down. I had most of it was ballasted, and it was as if it was within the Grand Canyon or a Swiss Alp equivalent of, and that's how I wanted the layout to run. And then I was just passing loops, so I could maybe run 2 or 3 trains through different times, and then they could pass each other. And it was pretty much far on. But one of the biggest things was we moved house, so I had to rip it all out anyway, because it was in the attic at the time. And I was like, so everything got ripped out. But I saved what I could, and then I moved to a new house, and I thought, well, it's maybe a time for a fresh start. A lot of my friends were still doing HO. One of them had started. He'd put a 30-foot by 10-foot shed in his back garden. Started building a multi-deck layout there, and I thought, yeah, that sounds like an idea, because I'm not bugging people in the house by going up in the attic. I can control the temperature a little bit easier in a shed, and I can also take my trains and run them in his layout, and he can bring his over and run them in mine. So it started to bring the kind of club community side of things back in, rather than me just sitting on my attic playing trains myself.
How did you network with these friends? How did you get to meet the model railroad friends that you have?
Mainly through exhibitions in Scotland is the best way. I mean, I was just last month I was at Preston Model Railway Show, which is about 2.5 hours south of us, and there's maybe about 20 or 30 clubs in Scotland, and without a doubt you're going to have another club in Scotland have a layout there, and that's when you catch up. And it gets to the day, you're busy entertaining the crowd. It gets to the night, then we meet up at night, go out for something to eat, have a chill, talk about what the clubs are building, what the different things are happening with the club, how clubs are actually now in UK are starting to change, where a more static, what we would call a static layout, where the club is building a layout and a premises to run at the club, is actually starting to become a bit more popular. Because we've just had one of the biggest shows in the UK, Warley, just not run this year. It's the first time in about 50 or 60 years. Don't quote me on that, but it's not running. It's stopped. And one of the second biggest hobby shops in the UK, Hatton's, went into receivership and stopped. And we have a thing over here called where we left the European Union, so import costs even from the UK, for the US, is massive now. I mean, I can pay $80 for a local, and then I can pay $90 in a tax, and then another $45 on postage. So it's phenomenal. I mean, when I first started building, I could buy a local at half the price. I could buy it here, get it shipped over, fair dues, but you didn't have that tax. So it's a massive effect on railroading in the UK.
Yeah, I think it's effect everywhere, anywhere outside of the U.S. I mean, we have Paul Kassar, a good friend here and executive producer of the show, who talks about his challenges of getting stuff shipped over to Australia. And I can imagine, and it's not just the distance, it's really the duties and fees and everything else that come along with it that really ramp up the cost.
I think 3D printing's helped greatly with this, because obviously I'm model American, and I can't walk into a model shop and go and buy an American car or American bus or an American building. Everything's British. So I'm either scratch building it, or I'm either having to buy it and get it shipped over. But the fact that 3D printing now is exploded, there's a lot more options, and we're going into model shows where people are still printing off parts for HO British layouts, but are also double O British layouts, and are now producing American cars, American buses and trucks, and like road crossing signs and a lot of different things. And it's starting to become a lot more easier accessible for us without having to go to the US to purchase stuff and bring it over. Because you want stuff to look as real as it can, and people are now able to do that with an STL file. The community is so good by swapping and interchanging and allowing to pass this thing over. It's not like a prisoner to them where I've done this, you're not getting it. I find that a lot of people are quite happy to send their files on and mix it up, unless it's a business, obviously. But and they're quite happy to share that. That's where I seem to get a lot of my detailing parts for now.
Yeah, it's still like a very open source kind of thing going on with 3D printing, and I think that is probably the way it overcomes. You just send the file and have the person print it wherever they are, whether it be in the UK or Australia or beyond, and then you save all that. I mean, it really is tough, to see. And Paul has shown me some of the numbers, and it's just tough. And you think it's easy for us. It's all right here within North America, whether it's being made or sold either in Canada or the United States. But once you start tacking on all those duties and fees and everything else, it's got to be wildly difficult. So hopefully 3D printing overcomes it, and it'd be better if we could figure out a way to not tax the heck out of each other when it comes to all this kind of stuff. But that is a topic for another podcast.
100% agree.
So you've got good connection of friends. You've met some good people. You've experimented with the Swiss Alps, and that came down. You move into a new house, and now you said you're going to move over to HO in a little bit more. What were you interested in at that point in this new home?
COVID had happened over here as it did in the world, and during that time I spent more than I should have done on YouTube, just watching American layouts and how they run. The KCS, Steve Davis, I think, wrote his layout. I sat and watched that. They talked about the trim and the cut, and they had an engineer and a conductor, and I was like, wow, that's what I want. I want my mates, my friends, to come over to my house. I want to run an operating session for a couple of hours, and then I want to sit and have a coffee and a chat, and no worry about it. Just talk about the world. So I thought, I don't have endless amounts of space, limited, and I thought, well, so I looked about and I managed to pick up a wooden 20-foot long by just under 10-foot wide garage that I converted into where my layout is just now. Sits tucked away, not enough for my wife, but it's tucked away down the bottom of the garden. And my friend John Bowman and I sat for probably about 2 or 3 months just working on the track plans, trying to get it. There's not a run around on it. There is no way to run a train round and just let it run. It's a point to point, because I love, in the UK you call it shunting, but it's switching over there. I love switching and shunting. I love playing with trains. It's good fun, and that's what I do. And I also love the scenic side of it. So I purposely didn't build a run around into it. And then we sat down and we says, well, how do we bring the operational side into this? And we'd seen so many dispatcher boards where JRMI's been used, and a lot more technical. And the group of people I'm with, I'm the youngest by about 15 years. My friend John's a good bit older than me. So they weren't really wanting to sit in front of a computer and do it that way. So I thought, well, can we build a manual dispatcher panel where you actually turn a switch and you can maybe sit at a wee desk and we can work it out from there? Because the shed's tiny. You can literally speak to each other as we are just now. You're not over any great distance. So what we decided to do is I decided to design the shed where I could have 4 people, because there's 4 of us, could operate a layout. And then I say to myself, right, where do I want to place this layout? And I'm very much a story-driven person. I've built an exhibition layout, an ON31 called Lewis Lake. My son's called Lewis. I wanted the layout in a lake. I googled Lewis Lake and found there's one in Wyoming. So I thought, right, I'll base it there. It's ON30, so let's make it a country and western one. And then suddenly, bang, it just developed for there. So, and it's great fun, and that's what I take to shows. But then for this one here, I thought I really like Cole, the NS modeler. I can't remember his name, the lad's name that runs it. He's NS modeler. He has an actual coal tilt that loads and unloads the coal, and the way he does it, I sat and watched his videos endlessly. I thought, this is great. It's a point-to-point. Coal's his main industry on the layout. So I thought, let's have a wee look. Loved the NS colour scheme, so I thought I'm going to base it on that. I had a couple of HONS Norfolk Southern locos, so I solely based it on that. And then we just built up the idea from there. And then I looked at, I wanted different elements on the layout. So I wanted a coal mine because I was going to run coal. Then I wanted a steel mill because the coal had to go somewhere. Then I thought maybe the coal doesn't always have to go to steel mill. It could go to a dock. So I wanted to put a dock on the layout, and then we can work it that way. So then I googled docks, steel mills, and coal, and come up with Pittsburgh. So the kind of story developed from there. So then I was like, right. So I just picked a couple of names for some areas in the Pittsburgh line, for the NS at the time. Picked up Driftwood. I've no idea if there was a mine there just yet, but there is in my layout. Thomas Edgar Steelworks was going to be the main industry that was going to run on the layout. And then there's going to be a couple of other bits and pieces that would just allow me to run different types of rolling stock. Like I've got a brewery, so I had a look at Pittsburgh as a city and found Iron City breweries there and the Iron City beer. So there's an Iron City brewery layout in it. I've got a petroleum plant which allows me to run tank cars, and I've also got a packaging plant, which my grandfather was called Robert Armour. So I googled Armour, found there was Armour Packaging, which used to do beef back in the day, and I thought, well, let's just say they continued on that industry, and there's Armour Packaging. So there's a packaging plant that lets me run a different type of rolling stock. So it allowed me to run lots of different rolling stock in a smallish layout, and then I could take it from there. So initially that's where it was going to be. It was just going to be based on that. It's not prototypical. I actually don't know what the style's called, probably random, but whether it's freelance or whether it's proto-freelance or what, I'm not sure.
I think that, it falls under proto-freelance, and I think proto-freelance has kind of like percentages, like maybe it's like, 20% proto, 80% freelance, and, some people it's 70-30 or, 40-60 or something like that. But yeah, it's fun that way. And I like the idea. And, we're talking about layouts that inspire that kind of stuff. Like, the first one always seems to come to mind again is John Parker's BNSF Fall River Division, where he took a Class 1 railroad, but then brought in all the things that he loved and had seen and just incorporated and created his own, basically division that the mark of a good freelancer. You're Googling it to see if it really exists. And he's done a phenomenal job with that, because I'm sure many have looked up Fall River Division, wondering where that is on the BNSF map. And yeah, so that's kind of what you've done here as well with the railroad you're creating.
It's definitely going that way for me. It's changed again. I see my railroad as an evolution. It evolves through different stages as I build it and then as I learn more. I mean, that's a beautiful layout that John Parker's built. Absolutely stunning. I've seen so many videos in it, and I've also watched so many of the podcasts where you've had freelance modelers on, and Benton and Southern done a boxcar run through Hobby Shop or Home Shop it is, sorry. I purchased a couple of cars, got them shipped. It cost me a fortune, but I thought I have to have this because I love this idea. They're absolutely stunning models. They're weighty. They're so well detailed. They're beautiful. And I thought this is an investment for me. And I follow his Facebook page, and I'm learning a lot more on it. So as I started to listen to more of your podcasts and look at the different things I was watching, what I've done is I googled Pittsburgh, and then there's a guy called Matty Gunn who does video shorts in the Buffalo line in the Pittsburgh area. It's just running shots of, I think, maybe follows trains and does a bit of yard things. And I didn't even know the Buffalo in Pittsburgh existed at the time. And I seen one of his videos and I went, wow, there's a Buffalo in Pittsburgh. And wait there, it's in Buffalo where my yard was based. And there's Pittsburgh where everything else was based. And then I started to look into the Buffalo and Pittsburgh. I found the roster, I found what they ship, because you can go into Buffalo Pittsburgh as a company and you can click who their customers are. And they'll tell you what they actually use as rolling stock. They'll tell you what the roster system and the type of locos in, the number in. The internet's phenomenal. So suddenly it evolved from what was just going to be Pittsburgh Model Railroad into the Buffalo and Pittsburgh Model Railroad. And then I found the colour scheme for the Genesis in Wyoming. I thought it's got its own colour scheme. I thought, great. Trying to find a Genesis in Wyoming loco already pre-painted is like what we would call hen's teeth over here. It's near impossible. And I was like, right, so I'm going to have to either learn how to airbrush, or I'm going to have to find somebody that can maybe at least give me a couple of locos painted. So I thought, right, so my layouts then changed from the Pittsburgh. So I went into different places that they serviced. So my steel mill, which was Thomas Edgar, is now changing into a grain refinery because they ran more grain at the time. And through stickers and through talking to people, I've connected with people that live in Pittsburgh. I've spoke to a gentleman who actually was an engineer with a Buffalo in Pittsburgh and's given me so much information. I've had people send me Iron City beer, just they've bought a 6-pack and they've sent me the packaging over, which I've cut up and used on my layout, and it's brilliant. And I'm learning a lot more. And now I feel it's turning more freelance. Where listening to more and more videos, I feel that it's a class 2. The layout is a Buffalo and Pittsburgh, but I think once I get to the point of having 2 or 3 Buffalo and Pittsburgh logos, I would like to then go on and take what I've got and then just design a freelance layout around it with its own colour scheme and with its own story.
I got to go on a quick tangent, so here's the warning to everybody. But all of this and what you're talking about and what you've learned, for anybody who's listening who doesn't believe that we're in the golden era of model railroading, here's a guy that's over in the United Kingdom in Scotland, learning more than he ever thought he would ever know about a Class 2 railroad in the United States. All that information available right at your fingertips. And with between YouTube videos and people sharing that information, and then you're able to go on, you can find rosters, you can find industry, you can find all this information. To say we're not in a great spot in this hobby where we can just do all this, and even locally, I can learn about railroads and not even have to go there or even set foot trackside in that area. It's just absolutely amazing, the information that's available, and look how it's helped you and moved your journey along.
Definitely. I feel the community and model railroading is a very inclusive hobby to have. It doesn't matter your modelling standard or your level or where you are in the world or how able you are. I mean, I know a lot of people that they don't have a model railroad. All they do is learn about something that catches their eye and interests them. I mean, I've took one locomotive from the Buffalo and Pittsburgh. I've actually got 3 or 4 in mind, but I've got one just now that I'm actually getting sent away. I've researched the loco. It's SW 1500. I've got number 44. It's going to get sent away. It's got to get painted. I found what it looks like. I found pictures and I found video footage from Matty. His great channel, I love it. And then my boss doesn't love it, but I love it. But I found this. I'm sent this to him. He's going to say, right, I'm going to make it look exactly like it is. Pretty much the same as what Rob Arnott does. No, Rob Arnott, sorry. The Weather My Trains, which I had a look at his stuff there, is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Is Dan Spalding over here that's very similar. It's going to him in the next week or two. He says it'll take a couple of weeks to paint up, and I'm buzzing. I'm so excited to see what's going to come back and then look at it. And then I've got these bright, shiny Benton and Southern boxcars. There's other bits and pieces I'm trying to pick up from as many different freelancing layouts over there that I'm watching. So when I run an operating session in my layout, for me, I'm watching these freelance layouts go around, whereas the other person might not have a clue that that's actually some guy's layout that's created all the information and pulled everything together for this. He's just moving a boxcar to go and get emptied at a packaging plant, for instance, where I'm like, no, this has actually come from this state and it's actually here because of that. And I love the story and I love it into twins. And you're right, the internet has opened the whole world to it. And during COVID, when we weren't allowed to leave our house for like a year, that was a release. And I mean, everybody I knew, apart from me, was building late because I was moving house pretty much during the middle of it. Everybody was building layouts. They all got so much hobbying done, and it was great. Whereas I think it was good for me in the sense where I started to settle down between flitting between different scales and different areas, and sat down and says, right, I'm going to go HO, I'm going to plan this, I'm going to look at it a lot more. And it's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, COVID was terrible, but in turn there were some spun positives out of it, and I think that's this hobby certainly spun some positive out of that. It kind of refocused us where we were able to go out. And I'll be honest, in the beginning of COVID, what I think about is that panic that set in, because I remember like laying in bed just about to go to sleep and like thinking like, I need to get out of here. Like I need to go do something. But it was like, and then you were like going down the checklist. Oh, can't go here. Can't go there. Can't do this. This is closed. That you can't go. And it's like, I just want to go to the hobby shop and walk around. Yeah. Like, right. I don't even have to spend money. And you couldn't even do that. Like, it was just like, you just felt the handcuffs getting tighter, and it just felt, but then you take all that energy and then you started looking around and start to plan and start to decide, different projects. Obviously the podcast was kind of, COVID born, and, just a lot of positives came out of it. And it sounds like it's what you were able to do with it as well.
Yeah, it was really good. I have my boys, he's 13 now and has no interest in trains, which is fine. He might come into it, he might not. Loves his football. Mm-hmm. But it was able to good with him because he helps me do a little bit of running, bit of operate, a little bit of operate, make sure things works. But it was good to connect with him during that and then show him different things. But then I was also able to reconnect with my dad and my granddad at the time to speak to him about the different things that he had seen as a boy and the books. I mean, the phenomenal books that he had. So and also my friends are a lot older than me at the time, and they were what was called over here was shielding, which is they were basically not allowed to leave the house, never mind go for a walk. And it was good to be able to stay in touch and have a common theme. And for people that say that the model railroading's going downhill, there's a lot of things that are changing. There's a big thing here called Brexit. When we left the European Union, it's cost a lot to happen, and companies are closing, things like that. But a lot of the smaller shows are flourishing, and there's so much more availability, and lots of little companies are now springing up and taking and filling holes that it's really opening it up to everybody, which is great. I mean, I'm at a model railway exhibition every couple of months, and we're getting 2,000 and 3,000 people coming through the doors, and a lot of them are kids looking for Thomas the Tank Engine and different things like that. But even the kids are starting to come up and asking you more technical questions just because of what they're now learning in schools, and that's good.
I usually try to limit myself to one rant per podcast, but I'll go on the second one and I'll just simply add to what you're saying. The hobby isn't dying, it's evolving. And I say that 100 times over. If you are somebody that did something, I mean, if you're a pure DC guy and you think that everything should be a $5 Athearn blue box, yeah, to you, probably it feels like the hobby's dying. I understand that.
You need to change with it.
But yeah, but well, or stay the same. Just understand that not everybody is going to be in the same group as you, right? And that the hobby, like everything else on this planet, as the planet evolves, so does everything on it. And the model railroad hobby certainly is evolving. The things that are available to us is many times over what it used to be. I mean, we talked about it with 3D printing, and boy, if you can just dream it up or even just sketch it up or whatever, you can make it and print it. And it's just wide open kind of availability on things. And although shipping stuff and cost and everything else is on the rise, sure. But the availability is certainly there. So the hobby, again, not dying, just evolving, becoming something different. And in some ways, and I think a lot of ways, better. It's becoming better. The communication, the connectivity certainly is driving that. The ability for us to connect, across the big pond and have this show today, or, the post-COVID, all these small shows that you said are popping up and you're getting more of that. So I think that's where, things are at. And it's maybe hard to see if you're, within a certain niche of the hobby that's a little older. But if you take a look outside there, boy, I think it's doing really well.
Yes. The electronic side of things now, the hobby, coming away into the DC system, what you can now do with GMRI and different things that offers. It's not even just people that are into model railways and trains, it's people that are into programming and people that are into different wiring that can really bring different things to the layouts. I can't wire to save myself. My friend John Bowman pretty much wires and puts my track down in, and I just add the beautiful scenery on top of it when it decides it wants to look nice. Yeah. But I think everybody is able to take their own part and put it into the hobby. And I think if you're positive, and if somebody, when we go to a show, when the group of our friends go to a show, I stand at the front of the layout and operate for the front, because the amount of times I get said, is there any trains actually run on this layout? Because I'm too busy chatting to people and saying, and we actually have somebody at the back that just sits and operates, and it's about inclusion, because the amount of times I go to a show and everybody's behind the layout, their heads are down, they're working away. Sometimes people find it awkward to ask questions about how it's going to, and you need to get these people included in it. It's how it's going to grow.
This is the second time I've heard this in as many days of recording the podcast, mentioning operating in front of the layout in exhibition. And boy, that's really a great thought, because I think back to just even like sales and like the trade show days. Trade shows are kind of dying around, but there's still some. And I would exhibit at a trade show, and it was so much better, and the conversations were a lot better connected when you get out from behind the table and you stand in front of the booth, and you catch people walking by and you say hello to them and they turn and they engage. And I think you got the same concept by operating your exhibition layout in front, like you're with the people. You are with the people by doing that. And it takes that barrier down, which is the layout. And now you're standing with them, looking at the layout and at that same perspective. I think there's a lot to be said about that, and something that, clubs that want to, engage more people may want to consider thinking about that. Don't hide behind the layout, get in front with the people.
Definitely. For myself, it's great, but because the ON30 layout that I take to shows is I built it and put everything to it, and everything's detailed, and we have a little flyer that advertises the layout if it wants to go to the show. But on the reverse side of it, we have 9 bandits that are figures on the layout that the kids have got to find. So it's really good to them. And then if kids are like, I found them all very quickly, and I'm like, right, we'll go and try and find the snake, or go and try and find the sheep, and you're really just engaging with them. And their parents are like, well, thank God I can actually, 2 minutes, I can look at something. The kids are entertained for a minute, and it also gives them a chance to say, how have you done that? What have you used to create this? I've never seen, because I don't build British layouts, I build something different. In the case of this one, it's an American one. The first thing they say is, "Oh, I've never seen this before," or "What is this?" or "What gauge is this? What track is this?" And it opens it up to their mind that it isn't just British trains and with the steaming and the coaches, which there's nothing wrong with. There is other options out there that you can go, right, maybe that doesn't catch my interest, but that looks really nice. Or I remember that for a cowboy in an Indian film I used to watch when I was younger, and that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and when you're out there, it's rewarding to you too as an operator. You know, you get out there and you get to hear people tell stories about things, and you get to see better reactions. I'm a sucker for watching kids' reactions to things. It's why I'm such a big fan of John Razook and his Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey train, and we had him on the podcast. Just seeing kids see things and glow and interact, and that's the magic. That's planting seeds right there. Those are the kids that someday are going to remember that, and they're going to pick up a train set, and eventually they're going to start doing things because they're going to remember those things happening in their childhood. So definitely things that we can do to help grow the hobby, keep it going, because it's better for all of us. The more people that get involved, the bigger the market becomes, the easier it is for companies to produce stuff because there's more people involved. It's better for us because it increases that availability. It really is a market that needs to be nurtured and benefit all of us when more people are involved.
It definitely does. And the kids, I mean, I was that child at one point in time when my mum and dad taking me around a model railway show and showing me the different things. And if there's, I mean, it's a simple thing. You hand the kid the controller, you ask them to press number 2, and a bell goes off or a horn goes off. The kid's face light up. And if they've not done anything other than make a sound, but they love it, and then they're chatting about it, and it's a really good thing. As you say, you're not quite so standish. The layout isn't a barrier. It's actually just an invitation to say, well, please ask me how I've done something. Does this interest you? If you don't like it, what do you not like about it? Well, is there something reason? And sometimes somebody says, I really don't like this layout. And I say, well, what do you not like about it? And like, it's just I'm not used to it. And I'm like, well, there's no problem with that. I say, obviously your opinion is you're entitled to that, but is there some reason he's like, it doesn't look real, or it seems toyish, or could be something like that? And I'm like, well, yeah, take that on board. But I think everybody having their own view on things and being able to give it and ask questions about how do we set this up, how big a vehicle does this need to take, and that opens their eyes. It isn't something that you need to be a 30-year expert in. You can literally go and grab a train set from a box on a toy shop somewhere, put something on a board, and suddenly you're away.
Yeah, the hobby is a very wide spectrum. There's just so many points of entry into it, and what level you want to be at, or what is important to you. There's just so many. It's really a wide open thing for folks to be to enter into. And one of those things, and I want to go back and ask you about this. You talked about operations, but I'm kind of curious what got you introduced into operations and the concept of operations, because it seems like it's a big part of what you're doing now. What was your exposure to that? When I
go to model railway shows and things like that, there's a lot of guys that go and like to build a layout, whereas I love to play with trains. I could quite happily for an 8-hour day at a model railway show playing a layout of any size. And I found myself saying to myself, I'm building this beautiful layout. If I make this into a loop, I'm just going to sit and watch a train go around. I'm not going to operate it. So I spoke to, there's 4 of us all together that have exhibition layouts that will each help each other between it. And I say to them, I says, look, if I'm going to operate this layout, because my friend's got the similar thing, would you be interested in it and come along and maybe once a month and have an operating night? And I was like, yeah. So I watched Steve Davis's KCS, I think it is, layout, where I watched an operation video for it where they had a clipboard and they had a switching list on it, and then the full train was taken in and past a reader which appeared on an iPad, and they were able to sort things out and move on to somewhere else. Now here's a beautiful amount of space for his layout. Then I started watching other operation videos where you're in, you get a chat at the start, and then you would have you'd each be allocated a job, and you'd go and do it, and you'd go and run your train. It wasn't too tedious where you felt like you'd just done a day's work, but it was enjoyable enough, and it made you think during it. There's a gentleman called Richard Chow, who's no longer with us in the UK, who had a beautifully stunning Irish narrow gauge layout in his. It was actually in a basement in central Scotland, and you were allocated when you went to operate. He used to bring model railway clubs in for an operating night once every couple of months. It was beautiful, and you were allocated a location, and it was an old signal box signals, so you would tap the signal to tell the person at the next stop that you've got something coming to you. I've done what I need to do. I've maybe switched out a boxcar or a wagon. This is now get ready to get passed on to you. And the communication, and that person couldn't see what I was doing. And the room was only 20 foot by 15 foot wide, but the way he'd cut it off, we couldn't see each other. So you were given like a work schedule to do. But then in the middle of that, he had what he used to call the Red Fox train, which was like a fast passenger train that you had to get out of the way of. So you were doing your work, being aware that you would hear a couple of bells coming. You're like, oh no, the Red Fox is coming. I need to clear the main line so that it can come through. And it just added a dimension to it. So I brought in only, I thought, this is great. This is what I want to do. So I set up 3 positions where you would operate in a one dispatcher. So the main line of my layout is all dispatcher controlled. The frogs are run by servos, so you can't manually change them, and it goes to a dispatcher panel. Yep. But I'm actually going to have the ability to be able to locally switch it, and that's coming shortly. So you'll have a dispatcher and 3 operators. Somebody will run the buffalo yard at the bottom, and then somebody will run what is now going to be the grain facility. Somebody will run Altoona yard at the top, and then somebody will run the backside, which has got the mine and the brewery in it. And then you're not, because I don't have the luxury of being able to move, you're going to work it so that the train is going to come to you. You're going to do your work, either take off, add on, and then it's going to pass to the next area. And it just gave, I was going to use GMRI for it. And again, after feedback for the other guys, he says, I don't really want to sit in front of a computer. I had a look at Ops Buddy, which I've seen quite recently, which is, I used to play a lot of wargaming, so I've got a lot of D20 dice. And I really liked the system that it randomized it for you, and it didn't make it too tedious. So I thought, I'll use Ops Buddy in this. We'll make it a very basic operating system where you move between areas. You're dealing with your training and taking it on for there. And then it's kind of worked from there. So everybody kind of works one area and trains coming in and out from them.
I think you're talking about Matt Forkam's Ops Buddy, aren't we?
Yes. See, that's it. It's brilliant. I mean, he makes it available for you, explains how it's done. I've amended the sheets to suit my layout, and then I've amended the roll table at the start, which my friends aren't that much into the wheres and whys of how I got it. I'm just handing them a piece of paper that they get to work on. But everything that if they bring a loco, it starts at the engine servicing facility. It has to be fueled, sanded, and checked. Then it moves to the area of the layout that they're going to work at. So it brings that in. And it's just it gives you a point to the evening to get together, because operating sessions and things like that over here isn't as big as it is in the US, where you probably have stuff lying on a track for months on end that's getting moved during operating nights, whereas mine will probably get tidied away at the end and reset when it starts again for that kind of process. So it's kind of coming more over here.
Well, that's excellent. And I think operations in general just starts to open up a whole bunch of new windows, and just I think it's the jumping off point for a lot of people when they kind of go from good to great in their layouts, when they realize, hey, if I build something that it actually does something, I'm going to get far more enjoyment. Listen, there's nothing wrong with if you want to do a continuous loop, and the enjoyment you want out of it is to see it go around and go through the scenery you've created. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But what I found with a lot of the folks that are, been on the podcast, their model railroading journeys just go from that. They hit that, massive 55, 60 degree angle upwards when they figure out that they can operate their layouts and become, have a purpose. And again, then it brings in all these things. It brings people into their layout. They get to share it. They get to, go to other layouts and operate. It just opens up a whole new world.
There was one thing I was going to say is, because I keep saying the sticker thing, but it's opened so many doors for me. There's a gentleman that I traded stickers with who then contacted me and says, "You're doing a switching layout?" I went, "Yeah, we're doing a switching layout." He says, "Well, we've got an idea that there's a group of 4 or 5 of us have layouts in our attic that we can't really get people in and out. So what we're thinking about doing was taking, well, my train maximum length is 7 foot because of my sidings, taking a train with 3 or 4 boxcars and a loco on the front of it, let's just say generic boxcars, creating a switching list and switching maybe 2 boxcars out and bring a tank car out, saying, right, it's now moving from the Buffalo and Pittsburgh and it's going to go to St. Lucia, or it's going to go to New York. So then that switch list then goes to his layout in New York. And then he's going to take that and he's going to say, right, I'm swapping out this in my industry and my layout, and I'm going to add this into it. So then you take that switch list and you pass it on to another gentleman, and this is going to be recorded and we're going to do videos of it. And then we're going to switch it between 3 or 4 layouts. Because I've seen NS Modeler took the Utah belt, which is my whole inspiration for model railroading, is that one layout. And he's taken the 2 or 3 locos from that, the train for that, and sent it to other layouts, and that now runs through the scenery of other layouts. And I thought that's a great idea. But if you're somebody that can't get to a club, or you maybe can't get to show, you don't have too much a group of people, you're a lone wolf, then maybe you can be part of an operations session by having an emailed switch list sent to you, like, okay, you've just got an inbound train that's coming from Buffalo that has this on the back of it, and you're going to swap. You can decide, if you use OpsBuddy, you can decide to switch in and out, and then you have an end train that's leaving your layout and going to the next person. And if some of us have decided to record this, and it's in the infancy, we're just kind of starting to put together.
Yeah, that's a really neat concept. There's so many neat concepts within this, and I think, COVID driven or not, I think we got extremely creative during that time when we were locked in and said, okay, well, what else can we do and how else can we connect, whether it be Zoom meetings or podcasts, and then we started thinking about, virtual operating sessions, and just so many neat things have come from, really kind of a terrible and tragic event. The positive spun off on that. And I think a lot of these ideas are kind of born from that. So it's really neat to see that going and it continuing beyond the COVID period to new concepts, new ideas to connect people. And as far as the stickers go, stickers are kind of neat, and people are like, oh, what's the deal with the stickers? But then as you get involved, you find out it's really not about the stickers at all. It's about the connecting of people, which is really the sticker is the vehicle for that. It's taking you there. So
I see it as a memory. I can look at my sticker wall and go, right, I've spoke to this gentleman here. Yeah. He does this, I do that, and I've connected. I mean, I bought a loco off one gentleman through the sticker collection and the rents of my layout, and it's great.
Yeah, it's definitely fun to show the network that you have and honor those and honor people. And of course, we have layouts that no longer exist, and they become memories of the people and the layouts too. So, very powerful thing. Stickers kind of are in a little bit of a lull right now, but I think they're going to come back, and I think people are going to really enjoy being able to create their own logos, the creativity part of that. How do I make something that's unique? And then, of course, the when you start sending them out and getting different stickers in from places, it's a lot of fun. So if you're not in the sticker thing, jump on board. And of course, if you want to get some ideas, we've created the sticker guide on Around the Layout. Go to aroundthelayout.com/sticker guide, and you'll be able to check out a collection of stickers that have been shared with us here. And if you don't see yours on there, make sure you email us at aroundthelayout@gmail.com, and we'll get that sticker put up there. So as we're starting to wrap up here, Alan, I just wanted to cover, because we kind of breezed over it a little bit, but it's an important part. Tell us a little bit about this shed project, because, we talked about the layout, but we didn't really talk about the shed. And I think that's just it's an equally important part. It looks like you built the shed, and I see some pictures on your Facebook page of that process.
It was a labor of love, let's say. When I moved in the area, I think my back is buried in a bit of ground over there somewhere, cleared the land, made it flat, and then brought the shed in. And then I had a friend who's an electrician come in and run the electrics for me. But it's It's 20 foot long, roughly 10 foot wide, which is I would have loved it if it was just a foot wider. Everybody wants their layout a bit wider, but
Yep.
but my Helix is 21 inches in radius. It has a 21-inch radius on it, and it's a bit tight for a 6-axle loco to come up it, so I can only run 4 axles up and down it. But that would have given me a little bit more space. So the shed, I'm a bricklayer to trade. That's my job was a bricklayer. I'm now a draftsman. So I built up myself, insulated it, lined it. In Scotland, it's known to rain a little bit. So I made sure it was well protected that way. Kept up off the ground for the moisture, and it works really well. And it's actually getting an extension put onto it very shortly. So,
how do you do with climate control? I mean, what's the climate normally in your area? Do you have heat and AC, or do you need that, or how does that work?
Well, the good thing about Scotland is you only have to worry about one way, and it's either cold or really cold, so or wet. So there's a special foil that I've put on the inside which will reflect too much heat but contain heat to a certain temperature. How it does it's magic, no idea. Yeah. And then I've insulated the roof, so I have a heater that sits in there during the winter. It's just an electric fan heater. It kicks over an hour a day, puts the heat in the shed, keeps dampness away, and then during the summer, it's a case of opening the door. It doesn't get global warming's kicking in a little bit, but we're lucky if we get to like maybe 20, 30 degrees at a really hot time, so it's not overwhelmingly hot. So I'm not getting much trouble with expansion or contraction of the tracks or anything like that, certainly in a couple of years since it's been built.
Of course, you're talking about 30 degrees Celsius, which which is roughly about 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, for us folks still using Fahrenheit. So when some of us hear, it only gets up to 25, 30, we're like, what are you up in up parts of Greenland instead of Scotland? But that's phenomenal. So, Alan, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on Around the Layout and share your story with us. It's been a very interesting one, and a person I'm going to definitely have to get back on the podcast because I want to learn more about your operations. And as you get into this ops buddy and using that more, and this idea of sharing operations and switch lists with others is going to be a neat one that I'm going to want to hear about. But for now, thanks again for stopping by.
Thank you very much for having me, and you have yourself a good day, sir.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's show on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Around the Layout. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at patreon.com/Around the Layout podcast. Past episodes and more can be found on our website, aroundthelayout.com. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.